Today, like I stated before, we're going to be covering how to safely and correctly remove and install rear cast spoke wheels and check the run out and adjust it if necessary. I'm going to hand out a sheet to go with this. This lesson here is kind of a builder on the adjust wheel bearings that we had a couple weeks ago. If you remember that most manufacturers, when they want wheel bearings set up, they don't want the wheels on and kind of the excess weight on them can throw you off your adjustment. So for the rear cast spoke wheels, you would have to remove them and then check your wheel bearing adjustment and then reinstall them. There's a procedure on how to do it safely and correctly, not only so it's safe to you, but so it's safe to the driver. You have read about removing and installing the wheels and setting up checking and setting up the run out in your chapter 16 on wheels and tires. But I want to actually demonstrate to you today how to do it, because for most people it's easier to see it demonstrated than to just read about it. So let's just go down through the job sheet here. This job sheet will be the same one used for your practice and your final sign-off on the task. The tools and materials that are required are a torque wrench, an impact, the correct socket, a hammer, wire brush, pry bar, and a jack. Now you guys have already been signed off on safety in the shop. You know how the proper jacking procedures and how to use the hand tools. So I won't, other than how it relates to safety on this particular job, I won't be covering how to use particular hand tools unless there's questions that arise. Wheel chocks. And wheel chocks on the truck. Very good, Brandon. You can add that. Behind jack, put wheel chocks. Maybe you should be up here, Brandon. Okay, as far as protective clothing, basically the same thing we wear every day. We're going to have our boots on, and we're going to have our safety glasses on. And obviously we wear our uniforms in the shop. Okay. Now if you turn to the back side of this handout, it starts through the removed rear cast spoke wheels, and we'll go through that. I'll explain the removal procedure. First thing you want to do is you impact the nuts to the ends of the threads so that the nut is still covering all the threads, but it's at the end of the stud. Okay. The reason for that is these wedges are under a lot of pressure, and I think we discussed that before. Keep the nuts at the end there, the wedges can't fly out. If you take the nuts all the way off, they can fly off. Okay. And the next thing there, you hit the wedges to loosen them. So just standing to the side, you take a hammer. And if you hit one of the wedges, they should all loosen up. The wheel will jump forward. And standing to the side in case the nut would fail, the wedge will come flying out. Then remove the nuts and wedges. And it's usually best just to put them in a pile on the side there so you don't kick them around. And then you'll remove the outer wheel. There's a spacer in between, and then the inner wheel. Then you want to inspect the surfaces for damage. What kind of things do you think you'd look for when you're inspecting? Cracks in any part of it. Okay? So let's just go through some of the parts. The rim itself. The spacer. Spacers have a tendency to crack a lot. The corrugated ones, you can check along the edge of them. You see rough streaks off of them, they're probably cracked. Okay, and of course, the other rim on the inside. How about where it mounts?
Take the bead.
On the spokes, yes, on the spokes itself, they can crack. Okay. How would you clean them surfaces up to inspect them? Just wire brush them off, or like I said before, check for rust stains. A rust stain is usually a sign of something cracked or loose. Then we'll go, are there any questions on the removal? Yes, Chris?
On the inner wheel?
Mm-hmm.
Zero.
No, these wedges here hold both wheels on. On the hub, there's a taper on the back that the rim comes against, and then you have your spacer and your outer rim, and this is the other taper on the wedge, holds all this assembly together. So when you think about it, it doesn't look like a whole lot holding them two wheels on there. There's 5 little wedges and nuts.
There's not much.
Okay, then we'll go through the installation procedures. Basically, the first thing is you want to install the inner wheel, taking care not to damage. What's that? The valve stem, right? If you catch the valve stem on one of them spokes and break it off, how many pounds of air in these tires? 100
Or so.
You're going to lose all that air. Plus, like I said, most shops go do their own company come in and repair the tire. It's happened. Just be careful where you know where that valve stem is when you're installing it. And when you're taking them off too. There's more chance of damage when you're installing vehicles.
Is there valve stem on here?
Oh yeah. Yes. They are not connected other than being mounted on the space on the hub together. Each one has its own valve stem.
Yeah, because then it'd be like just one tire for that one valve.
Some manufacturers put a hose from one valve stem to the other, so you have a central place to fill them up. But then there's check valves in there, so if you lose all the air out of this tire, you won't lose it out of this tire. So you want to be careful. Just look at your valve stems before you take it apart. That it doesn't have that connecting hose. So if you're going to pull one off, you don't rip the hose off. Okay. Then you want to install the spacer ring. You push your inner wheel all the way up against the tapers and hold it with your foot. Slide your inner ring in and square it up. And then the next thing is put your outer wheel on. Being careful to not do what? Catch the valve stem again. Okay. The next thing you want to do is put your wedges and nuts on, finger tight. And in the procedure here, they say put the nuts on so they're flush with the ends of the studs. Then there's a procedure on the back here. Pushing all the tires and spacers in, you'll snug up the top nut. We'll call that number 1, and you can see that figure 13 there. You'll snug that one up first, and then you'll rotate the wheel up to where number 2 was, bring that up to the top, tighten that one, and so on, 3, 4, 5, or if it has 6, you'll do number 6. Snugging them up. Then you'll have to lower the wheel down and torque it up. Then you raise it back up and you check for run out. Remember how to check for a run out in the when they described it in the book? Yeah, run out is the wobble, yes. Piece of wood. Correct. You put a block of wood and a piece of chalk, you find the high spot on it, put the chalk against it, you rotate the tire, you find the high spot, the chalk will mark the high spot. You'll want to loosen 180 degrees away from the high spot, tighten in at the high spot, and then retorque at the low spot. It should readjust it. Once again, you want to check your run out. Now, what was the spec in the book on
An
eighth of an inch? If it exceeds an eighth of an inch, you have to what? Right. Go through the adjustment procedure. Find your high spot again, and readjust. Okay. All right. So we'll go through the demonstration. I've already jacked the wheel off the ground. Okay. Making sure that the brakes aren't dragging. I have my safety glasses on, my boots. Am I blocking?
Yeah, go ahead.
Everybody see me there? Yeah. Okay. Okay, I've impacted the nuts to the ends of the studs. So you guys are standing directly in front of this. You want to move to the side. And then you take a hammer and just pick one wedge. Strike it. You hear that bounce? That means the wedge is breaking loose. And before you take the nuts off, just make sure all the wedges are loose. I still have one tight one, so go back and strike that one. Now that one's loose. You guys can follow me on the handout then. You guys go to lift the tire off, stand backwards, grab your hands inside the ring. Just pull it off and set it right around. You don't want the vehicle too high that you have to struggle to get it off. As soon as you slide it off, it should drop no more than an inch. You want to roll the tire. Lean it against the vehicle. Make sure it doesn't roll away. Move the spacer ring. Be careful when you're lifting the inner one off because the studs, you can get your finger between the studs and the ring. Basically, you should be able to just pull it back. And set that one to the side. See, that's basically the removal. What's the last thing on the list for removal?
Spec surfaces.
So, these are the areas you want to clean off. This is that tape on the back I was talking about. Just come closer, we'll see. Inspect the studs for tread damage. A lot of times if vehicles are in an accident, they have a tendency, if they're hit on the side, they'll tend to crack off of this one up here. These are cracked in any way. They aren't repaired. They're replaced. No welding. Stuff was maybe on the farm. No.
Yeah, that's not proper.
Remember, guys, when you're working on stuff like this, you're dealing with somebody's life. Now here we have one with some pulled threads. This stud here should be replaced. Look at that stud there. The threads are kind of pulled. They're still there, but they're pulled down. But if I had the stud here, it would be replaced. Okay. For our purposes here, though, I won't place it in a dealership or a fleet environment. That would be replaced before it's sent back out of the room. If those threads fail, that wedge will become loose. The other four will have to take up the extra torque, and they will eventually fail because it has extra load. Okay, so I've inspected my hub. I found any damage. Next, take the spacer ring.
Will those just come right out? They just unscrew?
They make a tool.
Kind of like a stud remover.
It's called stud remover. A lot of times you can take two nuts, double them up, jam them together, and you can back it out with an impact, sometimes. Other times you'll have to heat it a little bit to break the rust free. Dave, would you get that for me, please? Take a message. And then to install them, they make a tool that basically looks like a hex with threads in it, and there's a ball in the end. You thread the new stud into that, you run that tight, you torque it up, and that ball allows it not to lock in that piece. You can back it right out. The stud will stay, the tool will come off. Okay, we'll inspect our spacer here. If these have been over clamped or over torqued, you'll get a tendency to have cracks in along here. Okay. So I want to inspect that area there. And like I said before, if you see rust stains, moisture getting in there and working back and forth with the rust, it'll leave streaks. And this spacer looks pretty good. I don't see any damage to it. Clean the outside surfaces where they're made with a wire brush. This dirt can affect our run out. Anybody see anything else wrong with that spacer? Excuse me? The pinholes? It's not rusted through though. That's just from laying on the web here. If it was rusted through, we'd replace it. Now this wheel here, like I said, most of this stuff is donated, so it's not in the best of shape. But the areas where it rides against the back of the hub, the tapered edge, all this has to be, the rust has to be cleaned off. What would happen if you left that rust on there? It can affect your run out.
You wouldn't be able to torque it right.
Your torque could change, correct, Pete? You want to clean that rust off of there. Plus the rust in here makes it hard to slide across the hub. Most rims are painted. This one, like I said, is donated, so it's probably been out in the weather so long.
We just have to paint them.
Yeah, we'll paint them then. And the back surface too. Okay, you want to inspect the surfaces where the spacer ring goes on. What's that? No, this is that split ring design. Remember I said about the ones you have to be careful when the pressure gets low, tire pressure gets low, and you go to air it up. If this ring here becomes unseated, it can fly off. Now it would have to probably be driven to get it to unseat. Driven on a flat tire. Yeah. But this is not cracked. So that's normal. You want to inspect this area because what rides against this area here?
Spacer.
The spacer. Check for dents. This here, what you see that little dent there, that's where the rim is welded together. So that's been ground off there. That's pretty much normal. But damage like this, nicks here, if they're into the area where it seals against seats against the spacer ring, these should be dressed up or replaced, depending on the severity of the damage. This one doesn't look too bad. And then once again, you look inside here, check for any damage in here. If it had a cracked hub, it could have worn the rim. Okay? So if you put a new hub on, you put a worn rim on, what could happen? Could wreck the hub again, wear the new hub, or have the wheel come loose. Okay, so the inner wheel has been checked and the spacer ring has been checked. And same thing on this one, we'll inspect this one. This one has paint on it, so it's not quite as rusty. Any rust off. Now you can see this one's nicked up pretty good. You see this one here? These nicks? Looks like either the guy who installed the tire was beating on it with a hammer, or a mechanic somewhere has been beating on it with a hammer. That's not good for what we're doing here, if we want that spacer ring to sit tight against it. Plus, if he dents his rim, the tire mechanic comes and dents that rim, it could possibly not let this ring seat correctly, and you know what kind of damage we have there. So, that's why this rim was donated, because it has the damage on it. So this rim would be replaced. See any other damage with this? This is also a good time to check the inside of the tires where you can't see in where the spacer ring is, where they two go together. It's hard to see down in here sometimes. So if there's any cuts or nicks, if you ran over something on the road, and they got between the duals and put a cut or a nick, it's a good time to inspect the inside of the tire. Okay, so we have all our surfaces cleaned and inspected. We're going to start the installation procedure. You walk the tire up to it. Now, this is where you want to be careful, like I said. If you turn your hub so your valve stem will fall in the center of the two spokes, you'll be in good shape. Just lift it up slightly and slide it on. And what I said about your fingers though, when you lift it up, don't slide it back far enough that your finger can get between the rim and the stud. From there on, you can use the pry bar, lift up on the wheel, get it over the hub. Making sure your valve stem stays centered. Slide it back into place. And I usually keep my foot on here, because what will happen is, you see the wheel wanting to kick out at the bottom. You can't hold it tight against the tapers unless you have your foot down the bottom, push in on the top a little bit, so you're seated back as far as you possibly can be. Slide your spacer ring on and seat that against. Now we're actually going to kick out a little bit. Here's a good example of damage to the sidewall of the tire. But this would be caught on the, when we did a pre-trip or something, because it's on the outside. Now this tire here, where do I put this valve stem?
Facing out.
Same place as the other one.
Facing out though.
All these valve stems here are designed to, one will face in, one will face out.
They both face towards the spacer. Not the
Right.
right.
But the location of this valve stem, our sheet here will tell you that they want them in line with each other, on the same, between the same two spokes. So ours is right here between these two spokes. We want to find our valve stem. Turn it around. And in this case, you turn the tire instead of the wheel, so you don't cut up and dislodge every tire if you have it all the way back against. Turn it a little more. And I'll walk it in against the spacer, and it should hold itself there. You always really keep a hand in the tire though, in case it would want to jump off. Then install your first spacer. You want to inspect it? Could you have my wire brush? This is a reason. Check the surfaces, once again for cracks or any other damage. Especially along here where the nut puts the pressure on, they have a tendency to sometimes crack along there if they've been over torqued. Or you'll see real fine hairline cracks from being over torqued. You won't see maybe you won't see a major crack. But these do give some, but they can crack this over torqued. Put our first wedge in place. Install our nut so we're aware.
Straight up.
How far we put the nut on the thread?
Just about there.
So it's flush with the thread. Okay. Repeat the procedure. Yes?
I want to check and inspect the last one too.
I'll clean these other spacers up. Chris brought up a point about inspecting the nuts. What do you check on the nut frame?
Correct on the inside.
Chris on the inside? Any damage to the outside ring?
Cracks.
Could be cracks. What's that?
That's correct. Just round it off.
If it's rounded off. Usually from running the nut right against this wedge here, it will mushroom the end of it. They should really be replaced if they're mushroom heavy. Okay? Because that can change your torque value when you go to torque it up. What do we make out with the nuts, Chris? You good? Okay, one of these is going to have pulled thread slightly, probably, from that one stud. Of course, it doesn't look as bad as the stud. But if we replace the stud, what should we do with that nut? Replace the nut and the stud as an assembly, correct?
And if you don't know what that was, you better
Well, you can inspect the nut. That nut shows the most wear on that one with the worn stud. Taking estrogen. Set our tires in. We'll bring one stud or one spoke up to number one. Pushing the pressure in and tightening that particular one. So we rotate the wheel up to the one that was on the bottom. I'm alternating. Once you have them all snug up, you can go around the clock here and just snug up a little more. You're running it with an impact because if you look up the torque spec in there. To find the torque spec in the book, they have it broken down into different size studs. Now these particular studs here are three-quarter diameter studs. Okay, Brandon says it takes 175 or 200 foot-pounds of torque. So with this impact, we're going to get it close, then we're going to set it down, torque it up, and we check our run out there. Okay. And then we'll lower the wheel. Take our torque wrench. Make sure it's set to the, we'll set it to the low spec for here in the shop. 175. Using the same crisscross pattern. Now they're torqued up. Now we want to jack the wheel back up again and spin it and check our run out. As Dave mentioned earlier, we check run out with block of wood and a piece of chalk. Our spec was no more than, okay, so we need something to measure with, a ruler. You put your foot on the block here or your hand on the block and turn it. Tell where your high spot is. And you can lay your chalk against it there. Just keep spinning and move around until you get a mark on there. Okay, so our high spot's in here. Now we'll check the difference between the high spot and the low spot. If it's more than 1/8 of an inch, we'll have to, like I said, loosen at the low spot, tighten at the high spot, and then retorque the low spot. Once again, checking your run. Sometimes if it's out that bad, you have to loosen them all up again, push your wheels back, and go through the whole tightening procedure. I am right at 1/8 of an inch. You guys want to inspect that there? Go over and inspect it. My high spot's on the top, so this should be my low spot. And I took it right off the corner of this thing, and I'm right at 1/8 of an inch. That would be acceptable. You turn it around. Go back to the high spot here. Touch the high spot. And around to your low spot. That's our black belt. It's less than 1/8 of an inch, so I don't have to readjust. Like I said, if you had to readjust it for a two procedure, and I went through it. Sometimes having to loosen all 5 up again pushes you back. Any questions? Okay. Let's just go over this and summarize this real quick here. In the removal procedure, when we're backing the nuts off with the impact, what's the reason we only take them flush with the end of the studs?
So they have all the threads engaged?
Okay, and for what safety reason? So the wedges don't fly, correct? How do we get them wedges off then? Hammer.
Tap it.
Tap them with a hammer, standing where? Off to the side, okay? Because even though the nuts are there, one could fail. We take our nuts and our wedges off. We take our outer, our spacer, and our inner. And then what's the last thing we do on the removal?
Clean it all up.
Clean it all up and
Inspect for damage.
inspect for damage. What kind of damage are we looking for?
Cracks and rust.
Cracks and rust, holes, like that. Damaged threads. Okay. Then on the installation, what do we want to be careful when we're putting our wheels on? You don't break the valve stem. On just the inner? Both of them, correct. What's one thing that I stated when we pushed the rear wheel in and put the spacer on? What do I normally do? Put your foot against where, Chris? The bottom of the wheel to keep it from kicking out. And then we put our wedges and nuts on. And Ethan, describe the torque pattern to me.
It's in a crisscross pattern. You have to do, once you do top, you got to do the opposite one. You go corner that, it's the opposite one. Going out.
Just keep working across the wheel. Never doing two on the side of each other. Good. What was our torque spec for this particular nut? From 75 to 200. And as far as the run out goes, we did the spec, and the spec is 1/8 of an inch, no more than an 1/8. Correct. Okay. All right, Ethan, you want to give it a shout? Ethan's our volunteer for today.